Hey friends, good morning. It's Sunday morning, the week before classes start, and I'm procrastinating and loafing about and drinking my coffee and realizing I have been terribly slack in producing videos for YouTube. So I figured, hey, I can do something. So I was just browsing around and looking on YouTube. Always a mistake. There's terrible stuff on YouTube. And of course, what does YouTube do? They make a recommendation to me for videos about evolution. And so I watched one, and this was nonstop cringe. It's just me sitting there saying, why is this person talking? And then I realized, hey, I could just do one of those reaction videos. I could just do this and let you guys take a look and see what I'm thinking when I watch this moron going off on it. So let's take a look. It's a short video. It may get longer as I start ranting at it, but okay. So this is some guy named Gregg Braden, who I have vague recollections of hearing about him before, but not in any good way. And so we'll just see what he has to say here. He's being interviewed. He's going to tell us about evolution.
When I was in school in 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, I was taught what is called the standard model. It's a standard model of history, the standard model of human origins and evolution, the standard model of history in terms of a linear progression from less sophisticated to more sophisticated. Nothing could be further from the...
Okay, yeah, let's start there. This is familiar territory. I have heard so many creationists tell me about all the wrong things they were taught as a young person in school. And usually what it is here's a list of things I learned poorly. So I don't know what he's talking about with a standard. There's a standard model of physics, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about evolution somehow. And here he's saying in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we were taught that evolution was a linear progressive process. No. I'm not quite as old as he is. You can tell my hair hasn't gone that distinguished gray yet. I went through school in the 60s and 70s, and no, we were not taught that. We were taught relatively little about evolution, but what we were taught wasn't this simplistic straw man that he's trying to throw up here. So let's just forget about that for now. Let's see what he has to say about this. He's simply lying at this point. So okay. So let me get queued up here. Okay. I'll have to edit this a bit.
It's not that I don't believe it. The evidence no longer supports it.
He believes in evolution, but he doesn't think the evidence supports it. That's kind of a conundrum right there. What's his problem with the evidence? Maybe we'll find out.
The DNA evidence, very recent, in the last 5 years, the DNA evidence no longer supports the theory of evolution as the mechanism for human origins.
Okay, wait a minute there. That's so far from the truth. So the DNA evidence no longer supports the theory of evolution. Quite the contrary. The DNA evidence has been one of the strongest pieces of evidence in support of evolution. So he's got that all backwards. I kind of doubt that he knows anything about the DNA evidence anyway. But yeah, this is totally wrong. That is not true at all.
Evolution is a fact. And I want to be very clear about that. As a geologist, I've seen it in the fossil record.
Wait a minute. Evolution is a fact, okay. And this guy is a geologist? I want you to just contemplate the wiki page for Gregg Braden for a moment. Okay, so do you think this guy really is a geologist or even any kind of scientist at all? There's nothing there that suggests that. Okay, so he's going to say the DNA evidence just doesn't support it, but he's kind of vague about what DNA evidence he's talking about.
Plants, animals, insects, some primates. Something happened 200,000 years ago, and the theory breaks down when it comes to humans.
Okay, so some things evolve, but not humans. So this is the human exceptionalism argument. There's no real reason to think this is a valid argument. I mean, the DNA evidence strengthened our connection to all these different organisms. You know, honestly, back in the 50s, if he'd been reading this stuff, he might have encountered some predictions that there would be no molecular homology between different distantly related organisms, because it would all have been erased by natural selection over billions of years. And one of the surprises is when we started sequencing genomes, is that was not true at all. Quite the contrary, what we were finding is deep homologies, close relationships, that individual genes share an obvious ancestry all the way back between bacteria and humans. So no, he doesn't know very much about the biology, that's for sure.
And the DNA shows us that. The DNA shows us very clearly that we did not descend from Neanderthal, for example.
Wait, in this interview, the guy who's interviewing him even mentions this, that there are degrees of relationship with Neanderthals. So clearly we have some ancestral Neanderthal DNA, which tells us that, they contributed to our history. I'm beginning to think that what he's trying to argue for is an all or nothing relationship, that they had to be a transformation of one species completely into another species, and he doesn't have room in his tiny little brain to consider the idea that species are made up of populations of large numbers of individuals, and that the exchanges of genetic information are complex over thousands and millions of years. So his claim does not hold up.
We can pull the DNA from the bone marrow of fossilized remains of beings that we are supposed to be descended from and compare their DNA to ours. We didn't descend from Neanderthal. It shows that we did appear on Earth about 200,000 years ago.
Where did we come from?
Okay. He refers to the studies of Neanderthal genomes, and he wants to claim that they show they weren't related at all. But let's see, do I have those papers handy? I might. I had them. Oh yeah, I pulled out some of these papers. So yeah, of course I've got the papers right here, the ones he's talking about. This is about the draft sequence of the Neanderthal genome and a high coverage Neanderthal genome from Vindia Cave in Croatia. Yeah, there's all this data that emerged. These were from 2010 and 2017. So yeah, we got all this data, and it doesn't say what he claims it is, because the data all says that we are closely related to Neanderthals. I think the summary was that we're like 0.5% difference, which is about what you'd expect for a couple of populations separated by half a million years. So yeah, this data is saying that we are, in part, descended from Neanderthals, that we are related to other mammals. Okay. So that does not fill me with confidence in this guy. And keep in mind, he asked this, the interviewer asked this question, where did we come from then? You know, Braden wants to argue that there was this abrupt transition 200,000 years ago that created us without antecedents, I guess. Maybe alien antecedents. I don't know, this guy's nuts. But anyway, he asked that question. I would like to hear Mr. Braden's answer.
Greg. Well, to answer the question, why aren't we sharing this? When I asked my friend at the university, I said,
Wait a minute. No, that wasn't the question. The question isn't, why aren't we sharing this? It's where we came from. And Braden is not answering it. He's going to go off on a tangent here.
why can't you share this with your students? And he said, Greg, you don't understand. He says, if I shared that, he said, it would invalidate my 40-year career as a professor.
Let me remind you that these papers are published in Science, the journal Science. We aren't afraid to share these with our students at all. I have shared these papers in my evolution class. So where's this coming from? We're not all worried about this stuff. It would not invalidate my career to discuss further evidence in support of evolutionary theory, which is what this is. So, yeah, so far this guy is totally full of it. What other crap is he going to say next? Let's find out.
And I said, no. I said it would do just the opposite. It would demonstrate to your young students how valid and relevant science is, because it's designed to be constantly updated, and you're doing that. It wouldn't invalidate. And he said,
okay, yes, we talk about current research. It validates our work. So he's got this imaginary professor friend who is afraid to share contemporary research in evolutionary biology because he claims it will invalidate his work. Okay, that's baloney. No, it's not a problem. Okay.
He said, well, think how much money it would cost to change the textbooks. And I said,
it's not a good argument.
Okay, right there, I can tell you, this guy is full of it. This is a completely imaginary conversation. He doesn't know any professors. He's not talking to them. Worrying about the amount of money it would cost to change the textbooks. This is a constant complaint by college professors everywhere, including myself, that textbook publishers make trivial changes in textbooks all the time because they want to sell a new edition every year. Textbook costs are greatly inflated already. Those do not contribute to the bottom line of any professors or researchers anywhere. And they're eager to find excuses to change. So having, exciting new research that completely changes our perspective on evolutionary biology would make a textbook a must-have. They would be rushing to include this in their editions. So no, this is just imaginary.
you're not using textbooks, you changed it on the server, and you've changed it everywhere. And he said,
Okay, Fantasyland again. No, all of the textbooks I use are paper editions. However, there are now textbook subscriptions you can get to online editions. This is true. And yes, they can change them on a moment's notice, but when they do that, they charge the students more. They come out with a fixed edition for a period of time. So, just change them on the server and instantly, poof, everything is revised. Okay, I don't know what planet this guy's from.
He said, well, think of all my class notes I would have to change. And I said, well, that's your job.
Yes, I mentioned I'm kind of procrastinating right now. That's because I do have to update a bunch of my class notes. This is routine and typical. So this is another peculiar complaint. No professor is going to say, well, you're making me change my notes, because we have to do that all the time. Okay.
We have been taught that human life has very little value through the theory of evolution, that we are a random process, genetic mutations.
Okay. This is really, really familiar. This is the same thing you would hear from Ken Ham or Kent Hovind, this complaint that, oh, well, if you teach that we're physical beings, that we arose by mutation, well, then we'll have no values and we'll go out and rob banks and rape people and rape banks and rob people. I don't know, whatever. So it's just, this isn't true. This is independent of what he's talking about.
The textbook says that life is a behavior pattern that chemical systems exhibit when they reach a certain level of complexity. That's the definition of life that we're giving to our young people in school today.
Okay, I teach this stuff, right? And he says the textbooks give this definition of life. I can pull out textbooks. Here, for instance, this is the one I'm using this in my introductory course. And we can go looking for the definition of life in here, and it's not what he says. And in fact, it's considerably more subtle and sophisticated than what he's talking about. So here's what it says. This is the closest thing to a definition we get. The living world is wondrously varied. How do biologists make sense of this diversity and complexity? This opening chapter sets up a framework for answering this question. The first part of the chapter provides a panoramic view of the biological landscape, organized around some unifying themes. We then focus on the biology's core theme of evolution, which accounts for life's unity and diversity. Next, we look at scientific inquiry, how scientists ask and attempt to answer questions about the natural world. And finally, we address the culture of science and its effects on society. This is what he's reciting is gibberish. If you talk to a biologist, what you'll discover is that we don't have a flat out simple definition of life. It's actually a really complicated question. And so we don't teach, oh, here's the answer to the question, what is life? We say, here's a way we could answer this question. We don't have a complete and satisfying answer yet, but here's how to approach it. Here's how to study the question of life. And we go from there. So that's the reality of what we do in biology. So this guy's just making stuff up. And he says this has been the case since the 50s. Erwin Schrödinger wrote a book called What is Life? That recognizes the complexity of this question. And that's an old book. I don't teach from that book. That's too old for us. But you get the idea. That's where we should be looking.
And it is such a sterile definition. It leaves no room for the specialness and the preciousness of life. And so our young people, through the video games that are very heartless,
all right,
very violent.
I just told you what we actually tell our students, that life is a question and that you've got to pursue it and you've got to study it and you've got to use these tools to analyze the meaning of life. It's not just something I can give you in a paragraph. And here he's saying our answer is sterile. I would say that his rejection of the scientific method is what's really sterile. And then to go on and blame it on video games? Oh man, he really must be old. I'm old and I don't blame things on video games, but okay. What more has he got to say?
Through the media, through the television, Where are we instilling into our young people how precious and special life is?
Okay. Yeah, where are we doing that? Well, I kind of think as a biology teacher that I do it in the biology classroom. We talk about this all the time. Life is amazing. There's all this cool stuff in biology and in life. It's not sterile. Actually, biology is kind of the opposite of sterile. And it's all right there. There's wonderful stuff to learn. We do that already. So, that's one answer. But, then I have a family, and I think I've taught my family that life is wonderful as well. My kids enjoy video games. Maybe they're learning the value of a happy life by having a good time playing, especially during this pandemic. So this guy's, I don't know what he's talking about, but he's going to talk some more. Here, let's hear.
When we begin to see what the DNA is telling us, it tells us something far beyond random genetic mutations is responsible for us. And that's, I think, where the change in thinking must begin.
All right. He is correct, but I don't think he realizes where he's correct. He says there's got to be something more than just random genetic mutation. And he should take my biology courses, and I will explain to him all the solid evidence-based biology that says there's much more to life than random mutation. We got selection, we got drift, we've got epigenetic influences. In complex organisms like us or spiders, there are behavioral, social, all kinds of exciting interactions that play a role in making us who we are. So yeah, don't tell me it's just random genetic mutations. That's an idiot's view of a cartoonish version of biology.
Okay. And do we know where we came from at this point? Or do we just know that there's some kind of strange anomaly where 200,000 years ago, new DNA is introduced that couldn't have been morphed from Neanderthal? We didn't necessarily come from some other mammal form.
We don't know. That's
Okay, he doesn't know. Great. Okay, but one thing we do know is that we're related to other mammal forms as well as bacteria and fungi and mosquitoes, as Kent Hovind likes to complain about. All of these organisms are related, and we can see that in the DNA. That's the power of genetic analysis. So yeah, we don't know all the answers, but we do know some of them. And included among some of them is the idea that, yeah, we're all related here on Earth.
I released a book in 2017. It's entitled Human by Design.
Oh, the book plug.
The first half of the book is the peer-reviewed science that is now revealing the facts that tell us that evolution not only is not, but it cannot be our story.
Do I want to read this book? I don't think so. Because I read the contemporary literature, and the contemporary literature is all saying that yeah, we have strong evidence for the relationship of all these different organisms. In particular, in evolutionary biology, it's just a common thing. Here's a cladogram that illustrates relationships between all these organisms. Here's a genomic analysis that shows these particular genes are inherited in this particular way. Or here's another genomic analysis that shows the presence of these variations in the genes in this single population. It's ludicrous to argue that science is not supporting evolutionary theory.
And this is the whole point. Science, our young people today in universities are about to dedicate their entire lives to unraveling the mystery of our origin. They're being forced to take every iota, every piece of evidence they find, and force it into a pre-existing story called evolution. Even if it doesn't fit, it's like a square peg in a round hole. If you pound hard enough, it will fit, but it's never a good fit. And there's a huge difference between forcing the evidence into a pre-existing story and allowing the evidence to lead to whatever story it tells.
Exactly. I read you that bit from Campbell, okay? The whole point of our education is not to force our students to follow a particular dogmatic paradigm. It's to force our students to learn to appreciate the evidence and recognize the importance of critical thinking and being able to put together the evidence into a coherent story. And it just so happens that the best framework for explaining the existence of life on Earth is evolutionary biology. That does the job. So what he's arguing for is a dogmatic rejection of good ideas. That's what he wants to do, because he's got some hobby horse that in this interview he is not telling us about. He doesn't tell us about the evidence that he presents in his book. He's just, here's my opinion of evolutionary biology, and I think we ought not to teach it to our students. But sorry, I'm going to keep on teaching it to my students. If other professors don't want to, that'll give my students a competitive edge. So go ahead. Throw away your evolutionary biology textbooks, and it'll be students from the University of Minnesota Morris that will triumph, because they'll know what they're talking about.
We don't know what happened, but we do know that where we have been spinning our wheels for 150 years, since Charles Darwin's time, 150 years, the best minds in academia, the best universities, the most advanced technology, the greatest sums of money have been put in to trying to solve this mystery, Brian, and we have yet to come up with one shred of physical evidence that links modern humans with the forms of life that we believe, have been taught to believe, are our predecessors.
Okay, where to go with this? Yes, for 150 years, the best minds in biological science have been pursuing this question and trying to come up with answers. And they've been collecting reams of evidence and publishing it, evaluating it, discussing it. And they have come up with an answer that Mr. Gregg Braden would like us to reject. Think about that for a moment. But then also, Mr. Gregg Braden likes to claim that we haven't found any evidence at all that links different organisms in evolutionary biology. And, you know, he mentioned, okay, these papers I flashed at you before, yeah, these are evidence, pretty good evidence, that we can look at different organisms and we can place them on a tree, on a hierarchical tree, that suggests the relationships between them. That's evidence. I'm sorry, you can't just wave it away and say, no, it doesn't count, because it contradicts your pet dogmatic hypothesis. These are evidence. I mean, I was just reading a paper about spiders and the links between the visual pathways and our pathways are molecularly similar. Okay? That's evidence that we are related to spiders. It's very distant. It's like a 500, 600 million year old relationship, but it's an old relationship. And yeah, we can still see the evidence in the genome. You don't get to just say there is no evidence, because there is. If you want to disagree with that evidence, you have to give me a lot more detail than what Gregg Braden is telling us here. All right. Hey, sorry, I'm back. I had to hang up for a minute and go answer the phone because my granddaughter called me, and you know, that has priority over this bozo. So anyway, now I'm back. Let's hear what he has to say in conclusion for his exciting collection of lies.
And if you look at the charts, the Smithsonian Institute, for example, and you look at those very well-known evolutionary family trees, we're up here and all these other forms of life, and we're connected through these lines. If you look closely, the lines are broken lines because they are called inferred or speculative relationships. They're believed to exist, yet no evidence has been found to date. And if we were looking in the right place, I think we would have found something.
Okay, that's his strong concluding argument, I guess, that, oh gosh, there are dotted lines in the diagrams that the Smithsonian Institute puts out. Okay, the fact that we do not have individual representatives of every stage of evolution, that we do not have every single ancestral individual preserved in the fossil record, is cause for some reservation about our interpretations. Yes, that's true. That's why scientists are cautious, and they will sometimes, but not always, use those dotted lines, because we want to make it absolutely clear that what's obvious to us may not be obvious to somebody else. Okay? So that's all those dotted lines mean. The fact that they are inferences, that they are interpretations of the evidence, does not mean that there is no evidence, as this guy tries to claim. Okay, so yeah, that was something, I guess. Anyway, I'm going to stop there because, yeah, we've had enough of this already, right? Anyway, so as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been a really lousy YouTuber. So if you feel like, hey, this is mildly interesting, you should do this every week. I could try and set aside Sunday mornings to drink my coffee and talk on camera for a little bit and all that kind of stuff. Well, we'll see. We'll see how busy the semester gets. So yeah, let me just suggest that. And if you disagree or agree, let me know in the comments. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all the creationists telling me to shut up in the comments. It'll be fun. Otherwise, what I got scrolling by here, these are all my Patreon supporters on Patreon, the guys who have been wonderful about sending me some money. I'm really eager to get some money. I have these debts to pay off. And you know, look at me. I'm getting old. I'm getting all these morbid thoughts, and I'm just thinking, you know, it sure would be nice to get this debt paid off before I croak, because I'd rather not just leave my wife this mysterious load of debt where she has to every month repay a lawyer for protecting us from a creeper. So yeah, if you don't like me, that's okay. Make a donation for my wife, so she has something positive to look forward to. Anyway, that's all these wonderful people are there. They've been a great help. I appreciate their contributions. I'm sort of just sitting here killing time. After this, I have to buckle down and work on my cell biology course. You know, the course that uses that textbook I read from, that I'll be teaching to my students, all that stuff that Mr. Braden doesn't believe we do. So anyway, that's where I'm at. Yeah. I'll try to do it again next week. Got some other plans too, but we'll see. We'll see if they happen. It seems like I'm constantly getting distracted. All right. So long. Talk to y'all later.